Let's go ahead and open up the prayer. You gotta thank you for this day, come together, and study your word, and be with us as we work through this lesson. Be with those mentioned here today in our prayer concerns, and be with our church, and we look forward to beginning a new era with the pastor coming within the next few weeks. Lead, God, direct, and protect us all as we go anywhere. All right. I would like to first start out with some good news. If you look at COVID stats in Henry County, Georgia, the United States, and the world, hospitalizations, death, and cases are going this way.
Oh, that's good news.
That's good news. Let's hope that continues for a long time, but you just never know. But anyway, better than me going the other way.
Sure.
Oh, by the way, the other news though is not so good. He shrunk that boy. That's the stock market this week.
Yeah. We could put it there. Don't even tell it.
Yeah, well,
Well, I took my dog to the vet this week and my vet said kennel cough is up, so don't take your dogs out.
yeah. Mandy and Dave's dog had to stay at a kennel about a couple months ago. We got kennel cough.
So did mine.
Yeah.
I've never heard of kennel cough. What does that like? Whooping cough?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it sounds like it.
Sounds like it.
Some kind of virus in dogs, I think.
And they have that, I mean, they're all like vaccinated, but they get it anyway. So,
Can they treat it?
Yes.
yes,
They have a vaccine.
antibiotic.
Horrible.
I said it's like COVID for dogs.
Yeah.
I had a dog, heart feeling. He get it out of food, throw it away.
Oh, my God. Treat pets is a trip, right? Yep.
Or like treating children.
Oh, man. Well, y'all know when you study the Bible, have y'all ever heard anybody that insists the only way to believe the Bible is it is in error? Have y'all ever heard that? It's error.
Say
that again? In error.
What's that word mean?
No, it's factually true to the nth degree.
My
Succumbing.
mother-in-law, God rest her soul.
Yeah.
Believed every single word.
Yeah.
I mean, which technically isn't a bad thing. I know you're supposed to believe it,
Sure.
but you know what I'm.
Sure. Which always makes me wonder one thing. Have they read it yet? I mean, a lot of people who say that have not read the Bible. Some people who have read the Bible and who study it and they're teaching at seminaries do that too.
She read her book.
I mean, that's pertinent to what we're fixing to talk about. So that doesn't take, I'm not trying to take away from the meaning and the purpose of the Bible. I'm just saying some of us heard that that's the only way you believe. You don't believe that way, you're not a Christian. There are churches, and preachers who from the pulpit would say that. And then the others who are very scholarly, who would argue very strongly against that way of looking at things. And they would say, you know, we're Christians too. But this lesson today to me, we've got a very short lesson. And to me, it's one of the most difficult stories to me in the Bible, including in Genesis. Genesis has a lot of difficult stories, but this is really tough. We're studying Jacob. Now, Jacob, let's get our genealogy correct. Remember, Abram or Abraham is considered the father of what? 3 religions, right? So, from his descendants. And Israel goes through Isaac. Anybody remember Isaac's brother's name? No.
Ishmael.
These are getting confused. And then we keep going. Isaac has a son.
Jacob and Esau.
2 sons there. Twins. And one of the purposes of our lesson today is about Jacob and explain how Jacob's important to Israel. and Jacob's relationship with God. So that's the important thing about it. This story today, I don't have a lot of problems with it symbolic. It's a very difficult story, literally. Symbolically, not so good. Okay. So you have Jacob and the 12 tribes of Israel come through here. And remember, it's interesting, Esau has 12 sons too, I think, if I remember correctly. But Ishmael would be the one that's concerned with the Muslim religion, right? Esau goes on to be an Edomite. And some of these stories explain the Hebrew people and the nation Israel struggles with the peoples around them. And stories develop of how that occurred. And what's the family linkage to how this occurred? Why do we not get along with these people over here? Why don't we get along with these people over here? Things like that. So, I remember Abraham's probably about somewhere, depends on who you read, somewhere in that neighborhood, BC. So that's quite a while ago, about at the most 4,000 years ago. Maybe not quite. Think about that. Does anybody know when we first had writings in this world that we know of? Which country had first had writings? We know of. Writings where kings wrote.
Greece.
Not Greece.
Egypt.
Egypt. Egypt. So the earliest writings are around 5,000 BC. Now, most of those you can't read. People don't know how to interpret all of them. You can later read them. By 3000 BC, there are things that become readable. So, and if you remember, historically, there was a great leader in the area we now know about, we call Babylon, but let's see, in that part of the world, Hammurabi. He was in the 1700s BC, mid to late, I think. And you can read, there's writings from his time. You can read during his time the laws of Hammurabi. So there was quite an extensive law written by Hammurabi. And some other, we talked before about the Epic of Gilgamesh and some of the other stories that are out there. A lot of them are available in pieces, not completely. You read the whole thing. So just kind of put that in perspective. And so as you can see, you can just do the time line about here. We haven't even got to Moses yet. Moses is about 300 years down the road from Abraham, somewhere down there. So that we'll try to keep that in perspective. In our chapter today, if you look at chapter 32, and we're just reading a part of 32. The first part of 32 is Jacob prepares to meet Esau. Now they met when they were born, didn't they? One of them was hanging on to the other one, right? Well, he's preparing to meet him again. They've been estranged from each other. They've gone their separate ways, so to speak. And why not? I mean, Jacob stole Esau's blessing. Remember that? Stole his birthright. Tricked him in his birthright. Stole his blessing from his father. So it might be understandable that Esau might be at odds with his brother. So it's interesting. It's this one who does all that stuff that's so important to Israel. He's just an old Edomite over here. So, and you portray this story as like Jacob's a little more savvy. He can trick his brothers, and you almost feel sorry for Esau. He doesn't seem to be too bright when it comes to some of these things. That's the way the stories seem to be told. You read through the stories. Although, if you'll see in the story we're not even going to get to, because you've got here Jacob prepares to meet Esau in 32, and then in 33 Jacob meets Esau. And Jacob is really kind of scared to meet Esau because he's afraid of what he's going to do to him. He's scared. So in the first part of this chapter, he's preparing a bunch of gifts. And he's giving the kind of gifts he's got plenty of. Donkey, sheep, goats, and things like that. And that's his gift to his brother. He's going to give a bunch of stuff to try to send that ahead of him. So when he gets there, his brother say, "Oh, well, thank you for all this stuff." The beauty of the story is Esau is very understanding and forgiving. Esau seems more like God than Jacob does in that story. So it's interesting how Esau responds to his brother. And then they later, I remember it correctly, they later come together and bury their father. I remember that story. So that's the story we've got. And then in between this, the writers have put in a story of Jacob in what we call wrestling with God. There have been people who think that maybe Jacob actually was historically wrestled with Esau, and then over time the story evolved. There are people who think that Jacob wrestled with an angel. There are people who think Jacob wrestled with God, as the story is told. And even as the story is told, it's kind of interesting to see how it's developed. Now, if you look, most of the stories in the Pentateuch are either Yahwistic, Elohistic, priestly edition, or Deuteronomist. Which version we talk to you about Jacob wrestling with God? You probably wouldn't know this unless a commentator told you, which a commentator told me when I was reading. It's the Yahwistic, which is a big portion of Genesis. And remember, some of the ways they can tell with these writings, they learn how they write, but a lot of they spell God's name different. The Elohist will refer to God as Elohim. This one refers to God as Yahweh. That's not. So that's how you do some of those. But anyway, so that's how they tell some of the writings, how they name God and some of the words. And the later editors that put these books together from these traditions have compiled them. And that's why you have a little intermixing of it. And sometimes you read stories in the Bible and you read it again. It's another version of it. Like creation is two stories, right? There's two creation stories right off the bat. You tell a creation story and tell another one. That's two different editions of it. So it's interesting how to study it. So anyway, between Jacob meeting Esau and preparing to meet and then beating him, we have this story that we're going to talk about today. And he'd sent his gifts and people ahead of him, and he stayed behind. Now they were sending them to cross the place called the Ford of Jacob, or the River Jacob. And it's not spelled like Jacob's name. Well, who knows how you spell Jacob's name back? This looks very Americanized to me, but Jacob River. That should be on a map. Oh, excuse me while I walk to the map. Can the camera see me at the map?
What happened to our map? Oh, this
Two of y'all see it in this minute. The map's way over here. I guess I could have brought it forward, but that requires some effort.
We can still turn our heads.
There's the Jacob River.
As of today, he said, maybe tomorrow.
Reference, here's the Mediterranean Sea. Here's the Jordan River. There's the Dead Sea. Excuse me, Dead Sea, the Sea of Galilee, I'm sorry. Dead Sea is a lot bigger than the Sea of Galilee, it's there. And then here's the Jordan River. And there's Jacob is, where you go here, I saw it right here. Right here. And Edom is actually down this way now. There's Alexandria.
So there was a Jacob River? River of Jacob?
The Bach, it's Jabbok. The Bach, but John Bach and Jacob could be spelled a lot alike in Hebrew.
Right.
So here's Jerusalem down here. Right there. But anyway, this is where they're at. They're on this side of the Jordan River. They're going this way. Just to get you some perspective. All right, so he sent people on ahead, he stayed behind. Now, one of the things that ancient people thought a lot about certain places and valleys and things you cross rivers, what did they think lived there sometimes?
In the river,
In the area, yeah.
something harmful.
Yeah,
Bad-
demons,
bad.
trolls. I mean, think about all the things that people used to believe in. Under the bridge was a troll lived under the bridge. But evil spirits lived there. So they might have fears about not wanting to cross at night, because an evil spirit might kill them. Nowadays, we just worry somebody shoot us, right? We don't need evil spirits. We got plenty of evil people hanging around, which there's always been evil people, right? That's probably most of the demons in the world anyway, is evil people. All right, it says, that night, Jacob got up and took his 2 wives and his 2 maidservants and his 11 sons and crossed the ford of Jacob. After he sent them across the stream, he sent over all his possessions, so he was left alone. So he sent them on the head. It says he sent them across the stream. It sounded like first he crossed, but then it says he sent them across the stream. He was left behind him. So again, it's a little bit hard to sort out a little bit right there. But, so Jacob was left alone, and a man. All right, so it says a man. A man. Most of us can associate this as a human, then, right? A man is a human, right? So Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him. Doesn't even tell us why they had a wrestling match. And I don't know if this was like an Olympic wrestling match or like the wrestling you see on TV. I assume like the former. Well, that's how I've got to get to the soccer field to see my granddaughter play soccer. It'll keep going on, but I will get where it won't keep going on. As long as you look at it, it won't keep going on. Okay. All right. All right, so anyway, the important thing to do here, a man wrestled. So Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him till daybreak. Now, why will daybreak become important later? Why was it important that they not wrestle past daybreak?
Somebody might see him.
Close. They're
The
close.
man might be revealed that he's not really a man.
Jacob might see,
But
in
he's
this
not
case
really
later,
who he is.
God face to face.
Oh, that's not allowed.
It's dark, so he can't see his. Now, it doesn't mean he can't see him. I mean, in the dark, if there's a little bit of moonlight, or if somebody's got a fire going, you can see a little something. But that's the point of the story. There's a little bit of protection for the thing that, you know, what they all believed is if you ever saw God face to face, he'd kill him. And yet we have stories in the Bible where people did. Moses and others, we have that where that occurs and they don't die. So
Yeah, but it's God's choice.
yes. So, but then again, maybe God never said that you would die. You have to look back how they said it.
But he says, let me go for the day is breaking.
So it says Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him to daybreak. Now, the other thing interesting to me about stories, remember, this story would be occurring in 1600, 1700 BC somewhere. Who wrote the story down? Now, you could say, well, as soon as it was over, Jacob would make sure to write it in his diary. That's possible, but that wasn't easy to do back then. He certainly, it could be stored in your memory. So it's always interesting to figure out how these stories developed over time and how they changed over time, assuming that they could, because people are telling the stories. So,
Most people couldn't write.
correct. Most people didn't go to school. They would probably never had formal education. So most people couldn't write.
And it wasn't for years.
Right.
So they were told vocally.
Right.
And this is years later that it was written down as it's remembered through all these people
Right.
that had taught it.
Generations.
And the thing of it is, the stories that they told for the Bible had a purpose of being put there.
That's right.
So you have to think about what's the purpose of this story.
Is it possible if they weren't literally wrestling, but they were wrestling with each other's minds with talking and trying to convince each other of different ideas, wrestling with a thought idea or.
We're probably more comfortable. But the ancient people would have felt more comfortable.
Well, I understand
That's
that.
what God. They can relate to that. They can relate to that story. Well, they can't relate to none of them have ever seen God, so I'm not sure how they relate to that part of it. But Jacob's somebody special. Jacob, Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, they're somebody special, so they do stuff that we can't, we peons can't do, right? We regular people can't do, we commoners can't do. So it's Jacob has a special place. And certainly Jacob has a special place for Israel, because they relate back to the relatives, so. I had a lady this week tell me she's Jewish, and she was telling me that how many families are related that go back to this one person way back in history. 440 families along the way. So she said that all these people and all these families are probably related through one common ancestor. Which you think about it with Israel, that's bound to be true. You got 12 tribes. You can link it, you can truly link it to the 12 tribes.
Mhm.
So I told her, so that's interesting. I can't even get back in the 1800s and know what I'm related to. I do good in the early 1900s. And so, and it quickly gets to be a mixed bag. So. All right. Anyway, so they wrestled until daybreak. When the man, still calling him a man again, saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of his hip, so that his hip was wrenched. Now, how do you touch the socket of the hip? Or is that not the best interpreter of the word? Touched. Does anybody have another version that says something other than touched?
Unless the book says struck.
Struck. That might be a better, in fact, I think one of my commentators says that's probably a better interpretation than touch. Because when a patient comes to see me, I can examine their hip. I cannot touch their hip side. So it's up under such a private area, most people don't want you to touch it anyway. They put gloves on it. The socket of it. I'm talking about the deep socket, where the, all right, here's your femur, here's the neck of the femur, here's the head of the femur, there's the socket right there. And that's located somewhere down in here, which is where actually arthritis in the hip usually hurts out here. Not out here. Not usually even back here, although it can. Hurt back here. People say my hips hurt me. Usually go low back. Or the sacroiliac. So you can examine the hip. It's very hard. I guess if you had a tiny little person, you can put your hands in the socket of the hip would be somewhere between this one and this one. You had a tiny little person. So struck the hip would probably be better than the hip socket. Just struck the hip. All right. But it says here, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip. Or again, I'm in an English version. Struck may be a better term. Remember, everything we're reading in English. That's another reason I say you got to have it literal. You got to read Hebrew. English cannot be a literal translation of Hebrew, nor a literal translation of New Testament Greek. I knew that when I did study Hebrew. I studied New Testament Greek for quite a while. We actually had to do it in my class. So we had to do exegesis of Scripture in Greek, which is different than doing it in English. So if you want to believe it literally, you've got to read New Testament Greek. You got to read Hebrew, or you're getting somebody else's interpretation for you of the best they can do with the words. So, it says, so this hip was wrenched. Now, what does wrench mean? That's basically usually a pretty severe twist. You think like it was struck to the point you really twisted. Maybe your foot was planted and went this way. Ball players who do that sometimes. We might say twisted rather than wrench. People still use the term wrench. So his hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. Then the man said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." But Jacob replied, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." Now that's an interesting wrestling match, isn't it?
Mhm.
I'm wrestling you because I want you to give me a blessing. I would say, if you were wrestling with me because you want me to give you a blessing, I'll say, look, why don't you skip the wrestling? I'll just give you a blessing. If I had the power to give a blessing, I say the blessing every day. That's a little different, I suppose. But this is a point of the story about getting God's blessing. But anyway, so he's not gonna let him go unless you bless him. The man asked him, "What is your name?" Now that's another puzzling thing to me. What is your name? Why do we have God asking you, what is your name? The point of the story is going to be the changing of the name.
Mhm.
But why would God ask you, what is your name? And you can come up with all kinds of theories why people try to explain that away, but I'm just reading. It says, what is your name? Okay. And I'm like, interesting question. Jacob, he answered. Then the man said, your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with men and have overcome. Of course, he's got another struggle he's waiting on, right? Esau. Which he will overcome because Esau's going to be forgiven. All right, anyway, Jacob said, please tell me your name. So he's asking his name. You ask my name, I want to ask your name. But so that would tell you that he doesn't know who he's wrestling with, right? He's just wrestling with this man with a no-name man. So Jacob said, please tell me your name. But he replied, why do you ask me my name? Then he blessed him there. So Jacob called the place, I think I pronounced this right, Peniel. I can spell it. I think I can spell it. I remember long enough from the Bible here. All right, Peniel.
E-L,
P-E-N-I-L.
it's E-L.
I-E-L.
E-L.
Oh, see, I can't spell wrong. I can remember long enough. Yeah, A-L sounds so much better. Okay. I guess it's because that's what I pronounce it. Peniel. And that, I think.
And you got uppercase E and a lowercase e.
See, I just see your face.
Good catch, Ron.
Now,
That's this doctor's writing.
We nurses had to read that.
anyway, so later in the Bible, I think it's also referred to this way. Yeah, it is. So, all right. So he called the place Peniel. Yeah. Saying it's because I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared. So it's interesting. If he knew it was God, why would he ask God, "What is your name?"
It wasn't daylight.
Maybe so. And then
It
it
all
says,
sounds rather restless.
it's just a very strange story.
Or stretched to me.
Just as I say, to me, it's a difficult story to sort through, particularly if you're trying to make a literal interpretation of it, rather than to try to see why did they tell this. Why was this story important for them to put between he's going to go see Esau and now he sees Esau? And why is it so important for them that Jacob with the 12 tribes, which the 12 tribes become the nation Israel, so they would go back. We don't know what time did he really get named Israel. According to this story, he got named Israel at this point in time. But by the time this story is being told, he was known as Israel. So, and this is an explanation of how that came about. So it says the sun rose above him as he passed Peniel, and he was limping because of his hip. Now, would that make you wonder, historically, maybe Jacob had a limp? Of course, they didn't have hip replacement surgery, and if you broke your hip, you broke your hip. Things just, if you had an injury, you just had to live with it, right? You had to hope it healed up right. So it would make you wonder if Jacob literally, historically, didn't have a limp.
Okay, well, not to be too literal, but if his hip socket, it were completely out of where it's supposed to be, will it go back?
That's a good question. When somebody puts it back, it probably won't. If it subluxes, it will go back. Sublux means it slips.
Okay.
Dislocates can mean,
Yeah.
it's hard to dislocate your hip, but you can do it. Usually takes quite a while to dislocate your hip, but it will not go back.
Mhm, that's
If you
right.
dislocate it, it's not going to go back unless somebody knows how to put it back.
Doesn't that hurt?
Usually have a hip, you have good surgeon, hurts like crazy. You'd be in severe pain, you probably lay on the ground. In severe pain. It's very painful. So it would drive you to the emergency room these days, for sure. And probably to the operating room to get it fixed. If it was dislocated, it doesn't tell us it was dislocated, but it sounds like it could be the kind of injury.
Our lesson book says out of joint, which means that maybe
Well, that's
it's
it, and that,
it's gone.
and that's one interpretation of it. I think my version hadn't even said that yet, has it?
I'm just going by our lesson book.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. All right, so the sun rose above and he's passed, and he was limping because of his hip. Therefore, to this day, Israelites do not eat the tendon attached to the socket of the hip.
Who eats tendons anyway?
Huh?
Yeah, really.
Who eats tendons anyway?
Yeah, usually you get it into one, that's tough. You know, you don't want it. All right, here's the socket of the hip. Somewhat like this. Kind of blowing it up, make it look big. This would be a big person's hip. Which tendons attached to the socket of the hip?
That one at the top? I don't know. Where's the tendon? Right.
You got a lot of ligaments here. Absolutely no tendons attached to the socket of the hip. The hip's covered with there's tendons and muscles all around the hip. So you look at the hip as a whole, there's all muscles and tendons around it. There is not a tendon that attaches to the socket. This is the acetabulum. A lot of ligaments here attaching stuff to really hold this in place. But there is no tendon attached right here at the socket. They're around it. There's some back here. You see, you got your pelvic bone here. A lot of them attached here. A lot of them attached out here. A lot of them attached back in here. Some attached up in here. But there is no tendon attached to the socket.
But it says they don't eat the muscle. Not tendon.
Yes, what it says here, you don't need the tendon attached to the socket hip. There's no muscle attached to the socket hip either. There's ligaments.
You're right, this is a weird story.
Well, a doctor didn't write this.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it is going to be literally inherited. It needs to be literally inherited according to the human body. If it's literally inherited, I'm trying to make it literally inherited. Okay, that's not me. I gave up on that a long time. About 1 week into seminary. The guys who had trouble with that, you can just see sitting there turning red, they get mad, grit their teeth. Either they left or they learned better.
Yeah.
Over time. But it's hard when you're told you have to believe something a certain way. You know? So, but it's anyway. So so I'm not sure what tendon they're talking about. I don't know if they're talking about tendons attached up here to the hip or the back of the hip. I read somewhere in something that was written to explain this. It said they don't eat the tendon of the hip is the sciatic tendon. I read that. There's no sciatic. There's a sciatic nerve. I don't know who would want to eat a sciatic nerve. It'd take a lot of nerve to eat a sciatic nerve.
Depends on how hungry you are, I guess.
Somebody told somebody to make sciatic better, they'd eat in a heartbeat, wouldn't it? But anyway. So anyway, they says they don't eat it because the socket of Jacob's hip was touched near the tendon. So again, they may be trying to explain why certain muscle and tendon never gets eaten. Maybe it doesn't taste. I don't know. I'm not sure. I mean, to us, that sounds like a weird story, right? We usually eat stuff. We usually eat stuff that tastes good and it's safe to eat. So, although a lot of stuff we eat is not safe to eat. So I remember one of the stories I heard a doctor give a talk, and he said, people raise cows and feed cows and kill cows so they can eat them So then the cows kill people who eat them.
Hmm.
Thinking about all the cholesterol you
Oh,
get in beef. Although beef's not all bad for you, I know farmers in Kansas would have a fit with me, but it's not all bad. But his point was, we don't always eat things that are good for us. But I'm not sure what you wouldn't eat because of the story, that's what I'm. So, when you look at this, couple of things, Israel, the name Israel, according to this story, would mean he struggles with God. And the nation of Israel, over its history, has struggled with both God and the people around him. Just like Jacob's doing, the people around him, already his brother Esau, he's estranged from him, Isaac, Israel, they split up with each other. They struggle with each other all the time. They struggle with God. They struggle understanding God. They struggle following God. They struggle doing what God wants them to do. They struggle with not knowing what God wants them to do, and so do we. We have the same struggle. We struggle with God. We struggle with people around us. Sometimes they're not as far away as Edom. They may be next door, or they may be down the street or crossing another neighborhood. So people struggle with other people, different ethnicities. I mean, when I went to Europe, I was just amazed at how these people that all to me, I can't tell the difference between this group and this group. Boy, they knew it, because they've been fighting for years. And you think, why have y'all been killing each other all these years? Can't y'all just sit down and get along with each other?
It all started in a family somewhere.
Somewhere, right? And sometimes it even has to do with their religion.
Sometimes they don't even know how it started.
That's true. It's like a family feud.
Which concerns me about how our country, instead of doing this politically, we're moving this way. So we're going to get more divisive, and we may be fighting more with each other. We want to see something to kind of bring us back together. Have people. I had this talk with Dee yesterday. It was a talk with Dee. It'd be his own testimony, so I don't want to get his testimony. But we talked about the difference between being in politics to get power and being because you feel like you're called to be a leader. And my encouragement with him was to stick to what he feels his calling is, stick to trying to be a leader for your family, your community, your state, your nation, your world. Try to be a leader and not have political power. Because one of the problems we've got now in Washington from both sides is people are calling each other names, they're being nasty, trying to do away with each other. You got Democrats, so that's my left, maybe not y'all. Democrats over here and Republicans over here on my right, who really would love to do away with the other party. They get where they can't stand each other. Not based on race, not based on, although some people think one race is more this way, one race is more this way, but based on politics. It's getting where you're scared to even talk about politics out in public because somebody's going to jump down your throat.
I don't,
I know.
I don't,
We should be able to do
I
that
just nod my head.
gracefully. But that's trying to take this story and put it into terms today. We're still struggling. That's a struggle with God too, because we're struggling with power and where the source of power really is. Because a lot of people want power in politics. They won't live very long with it, but they want it right now. So, if I can run too late, I noticed when Susan looked at the clock, I noticed like I didn't finish it. I'm about through.
Okay.
But anyway, so that's one of my concerns, because we do need leaders who are in it to lead and to lead us to work together, not to split apart, not to say I'm going to represent over here, you people can go jump in a lake.
We need a hero for sure.
We need somebody that can reach this way and this way. That's hard to do. It's hard to reach like that.
With some
It's a lot easier to reach right here and say, when you got to reach way over here and over here, talk about something getting dislocated, you might dislocate both shoulders. So, all right. Any other questions or comments?
This is not lesson related, but I had a call from Judy Alfie about the next Sunday event to say goodbye to George, which I don't think we're having Sunday school. Is that right? and we're gonna have the event, and she asked, of course, our Sunday school class had food today.
Right.
But asked if we would bring some, food for next Sunday. And so if you can bring something maybe a little bit more special than a donut. And,
Is it for breakfast or for lunch?
well, it's gonna be during the
Between.
10 o'clock, it'll be the 10 o'clock hour.
Okay, okay.
So.
Okay,
it-
when we're not having Sunday school.
Right.
Okay.
Yes, we would not have Sunday school. It would be,
Okay.
ending about 11 or a
Yeah.
quarter till, something
Yeah.
like that.
So breakfast.
Yeah, a brunch.
Brunch,
breakfast.
let's do a brunch.
Yeah, brunch.
Brunch is probably better.
So if you
Okay,
bring
If you're going
something,
to purchase it, it'd be easier to find something for brunch than
Have a good week, Susan.
if it's gonna be special.
Okay.
but, and I'll bring a
Fruit
couple
and
of,
cheese tray or what.
yeah, I'll bring a couple of extra trays, and if we can put it on, together, if your tray comes in, it's perfect, we'll just go ahead and put it on the table. So if you would just take that message, and I noted the people I've not spoken to, and I'll call them. But if we can do something a little bit more special next Sunday and participate in the events, what they want us to do.
Our
So
class
all
will
the-
be the only one.
Oh, no, all the classes.
Okay.
Yeah, we're just one of all the class, but they're hoping we'll have a good turnout for it.
Well, he's been a blessing.
Yes, he has.
And is there, are they taking a loan offer?
I have no idea.
Well, I
I'll-
guess people can do that if they want
If
to,
they
which
wanted
is a
to.
really
I
good
think that would
idea.
certainly be a
It's
nice
done
thing.
a lot for us, I think.
He's been very kind to teach Sunday school, that's for sure.
Is that something, I mean, we got our checks, they're ready, and I'm to pick them up tomorrow. Janet called me Friday. So, is that something, do we have any money left over? Did we spend all of it?
I haven't, she didn't give me a report this week, so
Oh, okay,
that's probably not very much.
okay.
And y'all can put some money in today, it'll be there tomorrow.
Or this week, or whatever.
I mean,
Or
you
if
You can do
you
it
want to-
individually.
you could just do a class gift card if you want. You know,
If anybody wants to participate in that, we can, call me during the week, or call Lewis, give us a heads up, and do we have the authority to make a decision like that if we mysteriously came into some money?
But we can give whatever's in that, I'm sure there's some, because I think this person, y'all want to do that.
As long as we had a general consensus in the class,
Do that.
that's
I think
okay.
it would-
like, Our class particularly, he was
Yeah, he was-
very
And
kind.
today, the general consensus is small.
Yeah,
Right.
You have any idea how much it might be?
$100, $200, because we just signed a lot last week.
what if y'all just say like $100 gift?
Yeah, I think 100.
I think that'd be fine.
I do
They'll
too.
leave us a little bit going the next time. I think that would be fine. I mean, the main thing is just let me appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would really recommend that we all bring a card, a personal card with a note in it. I don't know what they're planning, but if our class could do that, that would show appreciation.
Couldn't we just do a card from Dylan's class?
Yes, of course we could, but don't you think it'd be nice if everybody,
I like the
Got a
idea
card?
of doing an individual.
I do too.
I think that would be.
Y'all are still old school. Now you can just say, okay. We appreciate you thinking.
It should be that, I wouldn't know what it was.
People just don't buy cards much anymore. I mean, some people do.
I do.
Some people-
I do.
I
All the
can't
cards
make them.
used to get a nice card for $3.
Yeah.
They $8,
Oh,
$7.99.
But you can go to the dollar store and get them for $2 for $1.
And you can get,
$2.
they had some, a good sale at Walmart. Some nice ones. There's nothing like holding a card in your
That's
hand
right.
and reading it over and over and over again and being able to see it. It's like looking at a photograph out. It's just something so much nicer than getting that machine and trying to find it and all that kind of stuff.
Well, today's kids would take him to a card shop, say, this is what we would buy you. You can read it from that.
It's like, I've talked to some of my patients about this. One thing I'm missing right now. Let me just show you something. Hold on just a second. Yes, sir. Won't take long. Let me see. 5:30 this morning. Oh, no, that's yesterday. Where's this morning? It's got an update. Sorry. Here it comes. It's updated. 5:30. Good morning, Daryl. Here is your Atlanta Journal paper.
There's
I
just something
miss-
so cozy about
I
that.
miss reading my newspaper and holding it in my hand.
Oh,
I have to read my newspaper. Click here to read
I
it.
could never do that Kindle thing with books. I like holding.
Then when you spread it out to make it
Yes.
bigger, if you spread it wrong, it'll flip to something else about that article. And then you can't get back where you were, or at least I don't know how to.
Double click,
Double click, is that what it does?
I think.
I don't know.
I have a hard enough
Anyway,
time with
there's the
people.
headline.
I don't need a machine.
There's the headlines. We won't see her like again. Who would that be about?
Gwen.
Queen, yes, somebody read the paper already. You still get the Atlanta, you can still get the Sunday paper. You can't get the daily paper where I'm in my neighborhood anymore. And I just told them, if I can't get it, I usually don't read the Sunday paper, I read the other days.
It is
Well, you can
historic.
order the new paper that's out, the Epoch Times. Does anybody subscribe to that or read it, get it in the mail?
That's,
I've seen,
that's pretty far right from me, Bill. I don't want.
Well, it's educational though,
And if you look at
if
who
you
writes that
wanna
paper,
read something.
you look at who's behind that paper historically, I had gotten some samples of it. I think some of one of my patients might. I probably would not subscribe. Oh, I know it would. And I just told the Atlanta Journal, I just take it digitally. It's only $12.99 a month. That's cheaper than I was paying for the paper.
It's not worth that.
If it wasn't for the sports,
Just before you got paper that you.
if it wasn't
shred
for the
up.
sports page and the obituary, it's all we need to order. And they don't hardly have any local news. All the local news I can find is on the north side of town.
yeah.
Is it gotta be one on the
Yeah.
south side somewhere? Yeah, if I'm not pushing the right button?
Don't use that.
Nothing to see. Salt sheds up there too.
It's like when they have a drive, I noticed this morning on the news, there's some kind of diaper drive going on. I missed who it was for. I'm assuming flood victims somewhere maybe. But you can only drop off in Cobb County. Why aren't we included?
Drop off and copy.
Yeah,
Because somebody in Cobb County sponsored.
Somebody.
you could have drop offs north, south.
Well, we've
east,
done that.
west.
Remember when we had Katrina,
Yeah.
the Bennett trucking, we used to go
Right,
out there and
because
drop off
we- yeah,
stuff.
we just started, but,
We're gonna have to get going.
Square today.
I have no idea.
I saw. Most people
Is it the
swear,
pumpkin things?
not yet, but
they
there are a lot of like military flags there.
Oh, those are all
Oh,
there.
somebody's anniversary was either yesterday or today. Air Force is today, I think.
Oh, it's Air Force
Okay,
Day.
it's what is he got?
Oh, okay.
It's a tent set up.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was just kind of flew right over me.
I see-
After the
I-
CLC on my way out.
Well, let's vote for it. Dear God, thank you for this time for us to work together and struggle together to understand the lesson, but help us to put it into action when we do struggle with our relationship with you and wrestle with who you want us to be, what you want us to do, and too often we wrestle in such a way that we resist your will. Help us in dealing with that. Be with our church, be with us, with our new pastor, be with George and see Parks, and pray that you go with him. Lead, guide, direct us all this week. Amen.
Thank you, Daryl.
All right.
Thank you, Daryl.
In 2 weeks, we're still in the Old Testament. Out of Genesis.